All right, we are good to go. This is our third video in this series. We're going to be talking about legacy that connects with passion and purpose. And I loved Kelly's take on this as she talked about values versus valuable. So we're going to really dive into looking at legacy more in depth rather than just saying, oh, I'm leaving generational wealth or gifts or toys or whatever for my kids or for my family or community because they deserve it or they need it. Because what that does is it could potentially create more entitlement, less responsibility, less passion, less purpose. And we also understand this because this has been done and we have data around this, that people who have left generational wealth in a couple of generations, first of all, the wealth goes down if there are no values or other things around it. But second, it could create corruption. We have also known this in terms of human history. For example, ancient Greeks, at the golden age of ancient Greece, they used to think of leaving wealth as one of the worst things. But this was a very interesting insight from years ago. I came across that in a history and philosophy lecture. So we'll discuss this in depth with you. And if you're with us, make sure you like this post. And I'll get Kelly to get started on this one. Just share her thoughts and then we'll go into this.
Okay, let's go. Let's roll. So legacy beyond the bank account. So what I want to invite you guys to step into in our time together is, what are the values? What are the models? And what are the ways of thinking that you desire to leave behind? And I think sometimes legacy is such a big, grand, universal feeling that we can't really articulate it and get on board until we're looking at life and type things. And I want to invite you into is, how can you activate the legacy, the traditions, things now so that they are passed on generationally beyond the wealth? Like some things like Faisal and I were talking about are personal history. What's your history? What are your life memories? That's all part of your legacy, because these memories, I think of something as basic as the vacations we went on as the kids were growing up is part of our legacy now, because now we live in Florida. But that it changed our whole family dynamic, where our roots are, the legacy for future generations. Now all my kiddos, like unless something changes, are in the South versus the Midwest. That is something that is going to impact the legacy. So accomplishments, your faith values, your personal views, your dreams of the future, and even down to something as simple as like family recipes. That to me goes in like a time capsule for creating legacy. So maybe the conversation is, how are we creating a living legacy? That might be like the activation piece, is how can you live in your legacy and let your values and your valuables leave an impact for future generations.
Yeah, I love that you went into the details of that. And I want to share a story. And I've thought about this for a long time, even when I was younger. The automatic reaction might be, we usually react to the contrast in our life. What happens as we're growing up? So if we grew up in poverty, our instinct is to think about money or think about gifts, or let's say, I used to think about it in this way. It actually hit me when my brother-in-law would talk about it. And I saw that I was thinking the same way, but then when I heard him say it, it didn't sound as good. It sounded better in my head, but it didn't sound as good when he said it. So here's what I was thinking. This was like quite a few years ago. He's like, I want to make sure my kids have gifts. I want to make sure they have birthdays. I want to make sure they have money. They don't have to worry about this, that, and the other. And I was like, yeah. And then it hit me. I'm like, we're creating a bunch of spoiled brats. That's what we're doing. And nothing against those things. Like my kids do get gifts. My kids get a lot of that stuff. But then what hit me was that, because I took myself back, I'm like, had I had those things, how would I behave? How would I act? Part of a little bit more reflection, then I'll just, in reaction to our past, I'll do the complete opposite. And that's fine. Our contrast tends to take us towards what we want, but then we also have a consciousness mind to step back and think. So we take our heart and mind with us. That's not just the heart, but the mind, and to really think through, what is it that matters to us, but also what is the impact of that on future generations. And part of that, we hear a lot of this, especially in the world, there's a huge problem around entitlement. Everybody feels entitled for everything without doing the work, without being, and obviously I understand some certain areas such as like basic necessity of life, as human, like food, water, these kind of things. Everybody needs to get it. Education should be a basic function of society. But when you go beyond those things, when people sit there and talk about, well, no, I deserve this, I deserve that, I deserve the other, but then they haven't actually done the work. And this is what I want to kind of talk about, is that when you look at most of the rest of the world, it doesn't operate like this. When you come into US and Canada, it's a little bit different because people have a lot of comforts and conveniences. And so people feel entitled to get more and more and more. And so then how do we think about that in our own family? So when you bring the same culture into your family, what does that do to that culture? When you constantly give toys and money and all sorts of conveniences, and that's the day-to-day battle for us to think about. But everybody will have to find their own balance because we don't actually have a playbook on this and we're trying to figure this out. But this is for you to think about, like, how do you think about this? How do you implement it? What is the model, like Kelly said, you're leaving behind? And by model, we mean, what is the role model? Like, who you are primarily the role model, you and your partner, possibly your life partner. And how your kids see you interact with others, how your kids see you connect with others, the kind of relationships you're building, the kind of business you're building. And so, for example, I love this. I was lying down on the couch this Sunday with my daughter. She's 6 years old. So she's starting to understand the difference between weekdays and weekends. And she usually knows when I'm done working, that's weekend. But so she looks forward to that. I'm usually done on Fridays at 3 o'clock until Monday. I don't have any work. I have a lot of work. I just intentionally, painfully don't do it. So as an entrepreneur, you'll always have work that there's no end to. So I was lying down and she wakes up in the morning and she lies down on top of me. She's like, Baba, don't you have work to do? Like, oh, it's the weekend. It's like, oh, so is everybody off on the weekend? Like, generally speaking, but I choose to be off. And we talked about the 3 days. It's like, well, she's like, is everybody off for 3 days on the weekend? I'm like, not everybody. Generally, people are off, but not a lot of people work. And I had to say, then I thought about it, I'm like, I'm off because I value our time together. I'm off because I want to spend time with you guys. And you could see in her face, like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's something, that's a value that I'm passing on, even though I have things to do, even though I have all sorts of things to do, but I'm intentionally trying to do that. That's a value that we're passing on, we're modeling that. And kids usually see the example around. And it's not just about the kids. And this one, I want to a little bit expand and we can go to Kelly. It's about other people that are watching you. So for example, when I was growing up, I didn't just need my parents as a role model. I needed other kinds of role models. For example, my dad gave me this model around being gentle with people, being kind to people, and those kind of things. But what he didn't give me was assertiveness. I needed that. I never got that from him. I needed other people in my life to do that. Instead of assertiveness, I saw a lot of, I don't know how to term this, male machoism. Aggression. I got aggression. So I saw one extreme, the other extreme. I didn't have the middle ground until I grew up much later on. And I started to see, oh, you don't have to jump from being nice and kind to aggression. I was doing that because that's the model I had. So I needed different kinds of male role models in my life. And the other side of it is the female role models. And this is the power of a community. If you're around community, you get a different variation of role models. We also understand that kids who are exposed to their grandparents, cousins, and different people in their life, they get a better understanding of the world because let's face it, we're all flawed. No matter how perfect you think you are, we are. So we want you to think about it from that model point of view, like what are your kids? What are the younger people in your life? Not just your kids, but it could be their cousins, it could be friends of the family, their kids. What are the little people, the younger people, the teenagers, what are they seeing in you and in the people around you? Do they have a variation of role models? Or do they have to seek that somewhere? Because if they don't have it, there's a human need for them to seek that. And where are they going to go? They're going to go out there and connect with somebody that you don't want them to connect. They're going to find a role model online. They're going to find a role model in their friends who might not be the best influences. And then later on, parents complain about, well, why is my son or daughter hanging out with my friends? Because they never got the need met from you.
I mean, honestly, I think that you sharing the story, giving a tangible example is really practical. But at the end of the day, to me, like, leaders leave a legacy. They leave a walking trail everywhere they go. So to me, it comes down to faith, ethics, and core values. But at the end of the day, I just think legacy is the contribution. People just want to be known, and people want to know that their life has meaning. So people want to feel meaningful. I think, like, we spend a lot of time leveraging and talking about purpose. And through your purpose, you feel like you're making a change, you're making an impact. And I was having conversations with clients about this earlier today. It ends up giving you clarity on the things that are important to you. And I think a real practical way to start, it doesn't have to be like, oh, go create your whole personal legacy. But no, but take this moment. And if you're activated or interested by this conversation, use it as a moment to self-check yourself. And a very basic question I would ask myself if I was starting this type of work are, what are 5 things someone is going to notice about me when I walk into the room? To me, your energy is your business card. So people, my legacy is speaking, my energy is speaking before I even walk in. So if you want to check yourself, if you want to check your values, if you want to really just convict yourself to rise up more, is ask some people, what are 5 things you notice about me? Or what are 5 words you would use to explain me? That'd be a good starting point to uncover at least what you're pushing out to everyone else. And then check, is there a disconnect between what you want it to be and what people are seeing you as? And then use that degree of separation to start making a 15% move. I'm a huge component of like one step in front of the other, because I think the legacy, if it's not broken down into small pieces, would seem overwhelming. So how can we take a snippet of our passion? Okay, cool. We've done some work. We are taking the time to figure out what lights us up. Okay, now can we take what lights us up and can we form a purpose out of it? Cool, that's like the next move. And then when you have your purpose, what's your bigger purpose? What do you want to be known for? What meaning do you want your life to take? For me, like, I want to be part of collective healing. I want to go wide because I know I can only impact a certain handful of people, but I want to be the light in other people's eyes. I want to be a transformational leader and belief activator. And that's what I want to be known for. So then my passion and my purpose, all the little things I do, from what I talked about earlier, memory, history, accomplishments, views, how I choose to operate my day, how I time block, is all based around my ethics, my core values, my faith, which in turn makes me a walking legacy. Not just me, anybody can take that and run with it if you desire to. So to me, it's a choice. It's a choice to be a light and introduce that to other people and invite them into living their living legacy.
I really, really, really love that. And I love that you broke it down in those 2 categories of who do I want to show up and what are the 5 characteristics that I want to show up in every time. And then also actually that survey it was interesting. For me, I hired somebody to do my whole website. It was a brand consultant and brand coach. And she actually got me to do that survey. It was very uncomfortable for me to do that. So I actually sent that out to all my family, friends, team members, everybody. But I remember when I was reading through it after I got it, like 10, 15 or so people just answered those questions around, what do you see when you look at me? It was really cool. Like, it was very heartwarming. And I'm still like, when I think back to it, it was really emotional for me. I'm like, holy shoot, I thought I was giving, but I wasn't sure quite what kind of vibe I was giving out and how people around me perceived me. And there were some areas that were like, okay, yeah, I can work on that thing too. But then it gives us a point of reference as how are we coming across? Because a lot of our perception is dependent on like what we perceive ourselves. It's not based on feedback around us. And I think that feedback is incredibly important. What are people, and this is part of the value system I have with my team, is we actually give each other feedback a lot on how we're appearing, how it's coming across, whether it's when we're delivering something or even when we're in team meetings. Well, like after the meeting, one of us will message the other one. It's like, hey, you sounded a little bit frustrated. There's something.
It's a call to be better. It's like a call to be better, not bitter. So yeah, that's good.
And this stuff makes a huge, huge difference. But also you remind me a couple of points of reference here. So we're not just talking our personal perspective. There's actually data on this. So part of I'm a certified high performance coach, and there's a lot of data that's being accumulated right now around that. So what they're doing is they're gathering data from top 15% of world's highest performers, and performers have a few categories. Are they happy in their life? Are they connected in their relationships? Are they fulfilled? Are they successful in terms of their business or work? Are they living in a growth model? Are they improving every day? Are they, and one of the things that the interesting surveys that came back, and Brett Burchard showed that to us. And he actually had to kind of do a self-check, and it was at an event. He's like, one of the things that they keep, those top 15% of the world, they keep talking about is that they have a role model mindset. They ask themselves every day, how can I be a better role model? And he's like, when I got the result back, I had to kind of check. He's like, I don't do that every day. And so just even asking yourself a question like, how can I be a better role model for a specific person in my life, such as my kids or my nephew or my friends or whoever, that can shift how you show up. Because as human beings, we want to show up better for others. We're a social species. We want to, and that, so there's a lot of data around this that's coming around where it actually makes a difference. And that gives us a sense of purpose as well. And it helps us amplify our passion in a lot of ways, because we want to use our passions in a way to serve others. So it's not in vacuum. Sometimes it'll happen because we have that intention. Sometimes even if we don't have that intention, it'll show up in terms of service because we care so much about that part. And it inspires others around us. And sometimes, because a lot of times we think of kind of purpose in relation to giving in terms of, oh, I have to consciously do something. But a lot of times it's just the way you are, like Kelly was saying. It's just the way you are that can inspire others to be. They can be inspired, and you might not even notice it. People are watching you in ways that you're not noticing. A lot of times I'll hear somebody will reach out to me after months, and they've been following me for months. And like, that really helped me. And I haven't coached this person, I haven't talked to this person. They just watched a couple of my videos, and something like, really helped me inspire. And I got into this motion, and I did this thing, and I completely changed my life around. I'm like, oh, so it's not just with the work that I'm actively doing.
I call them secret stalkers. I think everybody has them. You have people, if we all just assumed, like, imagine whatever your numbers are, doesn't matter. But what if you just assumed or just knew that everybody that was on your IG or your Facebook was there to do business with you? Like, how would you be a role model in that situation? If someone said something else that was so powerful, like around social media and playing into legacy and values and everything, and they said, if all platforms were pay to play, because it's making you rise higher when you're thinking about, take it like seriously, like people are watching and listening. So if you had to pay for that post, is what you're putting out there something that is worth paying for? If you had to pay $1, $10 every time you went on, you know what I mean? It makes you think on a higher level of the value and the content you're producing if you show up thinking from a role model standpoint.
Yeah, it makes a difference. And for those who are business owners, part of the reason why we charge is that it actually makes people more intentional about the thing. Because I've taken people, this became very clear to me, because there was a time where I was not charging people and charging people. And there were some people that were going through the same exact process. The same person is showing up. I was showing up to coach. One person is getting another level of growth. Like the difference in terms of growth was huge. The other person, and I was doubting myself a lot of times as a coach. I'm like, am I actually serving this person? But what I didn't realize was that this person does not have enough of a buy-in into the process. And there are different ways to create buy-in, but money is a big factor. People's psychology is very intertwined with money. Whether they say that they like money or not, it's intertwined. We live in a world of money.
Well, you'd have to pay to play. I think that means there's skin in the game, because I've done the same things, and sometimes I'll do different scenarios or situations. If I have a new program coming out, I'll do like one sponsored seat, and then everybody else is basically paid. And I find that if you have some skin in the game, it's also a flex trust, because if you're investing in yourself, then you're trusting you're going to do the work. And I find a lot of people don't choose to invest in themselves because now they're on the line and accountable to make it happen, because their money, their skin is in the game. So I think, like, when it comes to like exactly what you just said, I think there's an investment piece that goes into it to actually get a greater degree of growth because otherwise you just enter it kind of willy-nilly, like, it's free, I'll take what I can get, versus I just spent 10K on this. I'm going to make sure I show up and I do every single thing so that I can grow and activate. There's a difference.
Yeah, there's a huge difference around that. And that's part of the reason, even like for me personally, I invest in a lot of things around growth. Like just in the past year, I think I've invested $100,000 in my business and my growth. And I could have invested that in a lot of other places like real estate and other things. And I see the value in those, but then I know that there's something around my business skill sets and my own personal growth has an exponential effect rather than getting the predictable. And I still want to invest more in real estate and all these other areas. But the important thing was that one thing I've seen over and over in my clients, that personal skill set, business, these things are exponential growths. There are no upper limit to these things. But then there are other types of investments. They are up and there, it's more predictable. So our tendency is to go towards them initially, but it doesn't give the kind of ROI that we seek internally. But I want to bring it back, this whole thing around legacy, bring it back to the day-to-day life, like Kelly did, because a lot of times, going back to that formula around like when we're really thinking about what are we leaving behind, not just in terms of money, and that could be part of it. So we're not putting down money. There's a certain level of resources that we need to be able to feel safe enough to do certain things, such as a comfortable home, such as food, such as water, such as education. These things will allow you to grow in a safer environment, and there still can be challenge in there. So that's good that you're developing that for your kids, for your family and other things. But what we're trying to say is what are you passing down in terms of your values, your role model, and even family recipes. So for example, this is another thing, like I love you brought that up. So I come from a culture where like certain food recipes were passed on. And I never realized that until I was exposed to people who didn't have that. And for me, I took that for granted. But then when I talked to a few people who never got that passed on to them, it was actually fairly difficult for them to cook, for example, something as simple as cooking. And you can say that, well, no, I'm going to have enough money for somebody to, but it's more than that because it's a human thing. So just the preparation of food, that's why we say like break bread together is part of a huge religious tradition, not just in the Western world, but all over the world. Why do we sit down and why do we enjoy camping? Why do we enjoy picnics? Why do we enjoy these experiences? Because there's the preparation factor, and it's that deeply ingrained into us as human beings. So passing those things on can have a powerful effect on what gets passed on to the next, and it develops all sorts of things that we're beginning to understand. We don't actually fully understand this part. But I'm curious, what were you thinking about that when you thought about recipes?
Well, I guess recipes specifically, I was just thinking of, like, actually I have my mother-in-law's Black recipe. Like I mean, she's an amazing cook. Like literally everything tastes so good. I could follow a recipe and I even practice and try to put love in it, and it doesn't hit the same. I grew up with, I mean, my mom, bless her, she's not on LinkedIn, so I think I'm safe. My mom, it was like it wasn't a lot of homemade. It was like scratch, like macaroni and cheese was one of my favorite meals. Like, you know what I mean? So now you can see how that legacy showed up for me. Like my husband's our chef, he's our cook, because I never got on board. And as much as I tried to love it and I'm trying to lean into it, but the beautiful thing is then my mother-in-law and then my husband, my daughter has that piece now. She cooks and she's activated. It straight up skipped me. So I'm trying to have my legacy be in different ways with the kiddos. But I think that's why it's important for the people around you, because each person contributes a different level of legacy. My kids are going to be confident. They're going to be conscious. They're going to know how to manage their emotions. That's not anything I grew up learning. And it makes me think of a lot of my clients, and what we release, reset, and rewire is a lot of the deconditioning from some of these things that have gone down over the years. So it's really interesting. I love the psychology piece of all this. I love getting in people's minds when it comes to this. So I think like if you can take just a greater interest in the day-to-day and just check yourself, even for 24 hours. What's the language? What are you speaking? I mean, we're having conversation. We keep bringing it back to kids at times because we both have younger children at home. But it's like, it's your teammates, it's your clients, it's your business partners. You are actually contributing to all of them as well. So I think I love it's the 5 people that you spend time with. I'm a huge believer in that because I think that they're pouring in. So I think of the people that are around my children, and they have different gifts that are being activated within them that I don't bring to the table. So I think be open, get excited about what you're passing down, and don't use this to feel bad. Use it as a self-check to feel better. If you're not doing the things that you want to do, that you want to pass down, you can change. It's a choice. Literally, you could draw a line in the sand. You can make a choice today. You know what? I'm going to make a conscious effort to sit down at the dinner table 2 nights a week because I want them to value X. So you know what? Whatever it is, that's what I want to invite you into is life is a choice. These things are a choice. If you're not living your passion, you have a choice to respond differently. If you're not operating from a place of purpose, you have a choice to activate purpose, and you have a choice to activate legacy beyond the money. So to me, it comes down to personal choice.
Yeah, and I'm hearing objections as well. You're speaking. It is a choice, and this is actually one of the hardest things to teach people, because when you're going through your experience of reacting to things, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like, oh, well, I reacted because I got angry. I reacted because this thing happened to me. I reacted because that government did this. I reacted because my family member did this. All that true. It happens to all of us. It has happened to me. It still happens to me at times. It becomes a choice when you become aware.
Yes.
Because
ding, 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 mic drop. We don't have a mic right now, but exactly. Awareness is key. You can't fix what you can't see. So hopefully Faisal and I are allowing you to see something or coming in from a different angle that it hits. And then it becomes a choice because now you're aware and you can do better when you know better.
Yes, and that awareness is actually connected to, and this is a part that Dr. Bruce Lipton talked about this. I loved his take. He had a theory around, hypothesis around it, is that the conscious part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, might be, we know that it's a newer part of our brain relative to the rest, and relative to the hindbrain, the reptilian side, because that's more the reactionary, the fear response type of thing. But then the conscious part of our brain, as far as we understand brain and mind connection, we don't actually fully get that. But he was talking about the brain itself because he's a biologist. He's like, we're learning to make sense of and develop that part of our brain. It's not fully developed. So as a species, we're very young. We're new to this whole thing. And I'm paraphrasing him. I love that idea because understanding that as a species, we're evolving. We're learning to show up more with the conscious part of our brain. Just a couple of generations ago, human beings were highly reactive. Think about the wars, think about the challenges. We still have wars and challenges, but they're not nearly as bad as in the past, as much as it looks like it in the news. If you study history, you will find out that human history is a very bloody history. In fact, I recommended a book to one of my clients. He read, it's called Sapiens. If you read the first part of that book, is by Dr. Noah Harari. The first half of the book is he was looking for more positive. It's so negative, but it's the reality of what actually happened. He couldn't read through it. I'm like, just get past that. He gets to the positive in a little bit. He couldn't get past it because we've done a lot of things because we're still learning. We're still growing as a species. Now, that same thing applies to you. Like, we're learning to take charge of our mind, our brain, whatever that connection is. I won't go into the distinctions, but we're learning to understand our mind. We're learning to train it a little bit differently. And the choice comes in when we consciously think about this. In fact, actually, religions were one of the part of that evolutionary process that allowed us to make more conscious choices. Parts of it got corrupted, but it allowed us to look at things from a conscious perspective versus reactive. That's why we have a lot of conscious declarations in religion. Don't steal, don't kill, don't, like, we know this intuitively, but we're declaring it. We're saying that these things, we understand that it has a negative consequence. But I wanted to bring it back to the day-to-day because I want to hit this point home. Because a lot of people might be listening to this is like, well, no, I'm failing every day in a lot of these areas. I'm not passing on the values that I want to. At times I am, a lot of times I'm not. That's the same problem I have in my life. So we're not sitting here saying, well, no, we have mastered this area of our life, our mind, our consciousness. If we did, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. We would have been up on a ledge somewhere. We would have been in nirvana somewhere, but we are struggling and battling through the same exact thing. And the whole process, that struggle leads to progress. In fact, the two themes in the human development is struggle and progress. You can't have one without the other. So the day-to-day battle that you have within your life, when it comes to your thoughts, when it comes to your emotions, when it comes to you connecting with the people around you, That is the process of growth. That is the process of evolution. What we're encouraging you to do is to really become intentional. You'll find out that you actually have a lot of choices there. And those moment to moment choices, a lot of people think that it is in those big moments where I break integrity with who I am deep down. Sometimes we do, but a lot of the breaking integrity is in those small little moments when we want to show up in a kinder way, but we don't. And we don't even learn from it afterwards. We want to take action towards what matters to us, but we don't. And we repeat that day after, and it can go on for weeks and months. And I've done that too in the process. It can go for years. And this is where it erodes who we are inside. And then we can't come to a point where we can't be ourselves. So paying attention to little things, asking yourself every day, am I showing up as that role model? If people were to put my behavior as an example on the news, on the positive news, not the negative news, would I be proud of that? If my kids were watching me all the time, would I be proud of the actions that I have? And these make a huge difference. But even more importantly, I'll give you one other story. So I was talking to one of my family members, and he's fairly well off. He built a good life, and he was talking about his teenagers. And he was saying, I really want them to follow their passion and to go towards what matters to them, because he has a lot of regrets in his life. But here was the interesting thing. I had to ask him, I didn't want it to become a coaching session. I had to ask him one thing, because when he kept talking about his business, because he was leaving a business, he was going into another business. I'm like, so what are you doing now? He's like, well, no, I'm just going to go into this business. And I knew that he had a passion. I'm like, what about that thing that you've always wanted to do? It's like, could you do that? He's like, yeah, I could, but I don't know how to turn that into a business. And then I'm like, you just said that you want your kids to go towards their passion. So where are they getting the example from? Because it sounds like, to me, it sounds like do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Huge disconnect, right? Their kids are going to follow what he does, not what he says.
But I'm solid because my kids see me loving life and working. I'll give my husband a hard time. He might not love his job as much, but that is something I'll pass on, is like the joy for life, and not finding joy on the weekend, but finding joy in the day to day, in the moments and the love. And you said two things that I want to do. I'm a huge component of reframing. Anything that feels heavy feelings going to heavy actions, light feelings, light actions. And when you said, when we invited people to explore what's not working, okay, that's a heavy feeling. I wouldn't be in alignment if I didn't share with you how to make it lighter now. For everything that you wrote down on your list that you want to change, that you're doing wrong, I want you to neutralize that, because that gives you a pain response in the body. It's like, oh. Now I want you to then write next to it, write something that you are doing very well, because then that's a dopamine hit and we get to neutralize that. And when you integrate pain and pleasure, alchemy happens. And then that's where the growth happens. So I want you to take a moment and write down things that are going, wow, this is like, any of my clients that are high achievers, they have to-do lists all the time and sticky notes. We're constantly making to-do lists that shows the gaps of what we didn't get done. And I want to, so then a reframe is start writing all the things you accomplished during the day. That feels better, because a lot of us, if you're watching this, you're probably drawn to us because you are a high achiever. Like, honestly, let's call it what it is. There's some level of conversation that we're having that you have to have an interest in this to perk up. And the other thing that I wanted to share is, when I said you can draw a line in the sand, have a free start, to move forward, you also can't keep revisiting the old. So if you can't revise it, don't keep revisiting it. Draw a line in the sand, figure out what's not working, figure out what's going well, and then make a plan to move forward. So I'm going to close up my piece with this quote I'm going to try to whip out and try to remember. Exactly around legacy.
Drumbeat.
Okay, it's like, work for a cause, not applause. I got to pull this out. Live life to express, not to impress. Don't strive to make your presence noticed, just make your absence felt. And then feel the legacy, not just money. So that should equip you into stepping into values, I want you to make a ton of money. I actually want you to leave your family with a ton of money, but I want them to know that that's secondary to the values that you're leaving with them. Because at the end of the day, if you have money and you have nothing else, what's the point of having all the money? Because money just accentuates who you already are. That's my personal opinion. So if you want to do good and you want to pass on good, do good beyond the money. And then the money's a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And in relation to, thank for clarifying that part. Like, there are a lot of things we're sharing because we've gone through experiences, we've taken people through experiences. A lot of times they'll feel like we're saying one thing and then we're contradicting it in the next moment, because there are different levels of all these things. There are times, for example, when I want my clients to feel the negative, the heavy feelings, because they haven't faced it. I want them to sit through it. I want them to process it. I want them to feel it. I want them to face it. But there are times where I want them to, okay, now let's reframe it, because you can't sit with that forever.
Right.
That's what Kelly is sharing, is that there's a time of processing. There's also a time of reframing, also a technical point in our mind. Our mind tends to, or more specifically, our brain tends to remember negative things more easily than positive things. And so negative things more easily than positive things, because it just helps protect us better. That's just how our brain has evolved. So you're doing a lot of positive things in your life. You just don't remember it. That's why Kelly was getting you to write, okay, here are the things that I've done. Like, we look to the future for what we haven't achieved, but a lot of times we can look to the past for what we have achieved, and then use that as a fuel to do more that feels aligned with us. Yeah. So there always, as a rule of thumb, whenever you're thinking about one negative thing, you need to think about 5 positive things, just because that's the balance. Even in relationships, so we have data in a relationship as well. If we're saying one negative thing, we need to balance that out by one positive thing, but 5 other positive things.
I know. Oh my gosh. My husband will be like, say one thing that I said, like, oh, you didn't get the trash out. He's focused on that when I've said 27 other things. And we actually have had that exact conversation. Some people, how they're wired, even you got to double down. So since he's conditioned, I'm saying he's conditioned to maybe not see the glass full, maybe sees I have empty. I got to have 20 compliments to take away that one negative. Yeah.
And that's going to show up in a lot of relationships. So it'll show up with your business partners, it'll show up with your life partner, it'll show up with your kids. Part of it is how we're conditioned, like Kelly was talking. Part of it is just how we're wired. And we're, like I said, we're learning and growing. And what we can leave with, and I love that quote that you gave, and really be intentional about how you're showing up in your moment-to-moment, day-to-day choices, and really recognize that it is a choice, even though you might be reacting in that moment. And really, like Kelly has talked about this before, write your manifesto, think about your vision, think about what matters to you, because ultimately we look for ideals in our life. And when we follow the things that matter to us, we're naturally passing on, we're naturally modeling that thing for the people around us. And that's not an easy process, it's a growth process. And that's what we want to pass on to you. And we will continue to serve you, and we'll announce some things in the next couple of weeks with you guys. Share with us what was your greatest insight in our conversation today, and what's your commitment moving forward in relation to your passion, your purpose, your legacy. What are you committing to do? Because if this does not translate to actions, this did not mean anything. So I hope you got something out of it. Kelly, do you have any last thoughts before we end this conversation?
No, exactly what you just said. Share, because that helps us plan, prepare, and kind of even get laser focused on the parts of it that are standing out. Those are your gold nuggets. Those are the aha moments. And we can take that awareness now. And then second to that is give you steps, actually coach you through it, walk you through it, help you get on the other side of it. So no, I think this was amazing. So much fun. So good just to do life and business, and for you and I to kind of go into this powerful conversation. And I just hope that, to me, love and money is so tightly connected, that love and money and how you operate in those two things is going to equate to your legacy you leave behind. So I want to call you to rise up, people, in the most powerful way.
And please share your thoughts with us, and make sure you share this video with anybody, and your colleague, your friends, family, anybody you think is going to get value from this. And reach out to us. Let us know what your thoughts are personally as well. We'd love to connect with you, and we will continue to serve, like I said. So watch out for the notifications and announcements coming up soon. Hope you have an incredible week. Bye.